No parent wants to have a conversation with their children about racism. And all of us are wondering when is the right age and when is the right time and how do I go about it? That is something that we want to protect our kids from.
Once upon a time, people believed that a world where everyone was equal was impossible. They said that history was too empty of hope, people too full of hate. And then something terrible happened. An event that opened many more eyes and closed more fists. People from all over the planet were speaking up and caring about fixing the world's horrible problems. Out of evil, something good had begun to grow. A perfect moment for a little extra help from a few special people. My name is Ikenna Azuike, and I'm a TV presenter and filmmaker. This is my wife Meta, and our children Suki and Kobi. Cool. And what do the people look like?
Als ons.
And what do we look like, Kobi?
Bruin.
Bruin? Is Suki brown?
Yep.
What color is Suki then?
Wit. Nou, ik ben niet helemaal wit hoor. Ik ben niet zo wit.
And what about Mama? What color is Mama?
White, die is groen.
So, my children see color too. But what else do we need to talk about to help contribute to a world without racism? And how do we go about it?
Kijk, het liefst wil je het gewoon niet benoemen, maar ik heb geleerd dat dat juist helemaal niet goed is. Of dat het niet werkt, want de wereld is zoals die is. Dus ik denk wel dat je het moet gaan uitleggen dat het er nou eenmaal is. Dat racisme er eenmaal is. Je moet ook op een gegeven moment beslissen van wat ga je erover vertellen.
Maar ja.
Ja.
Ik denk gewoon beetje bij beetje.
Ja.
Droppen into the conversation. Op een kindvriendelijke manier. Kleur bestaat. Tja, en ik heb meteen de neiging om precies te zeggen wat mijn vader zei tegen mij. Gewoon, jongen, je moet echt hard werken, harder werken dan andere mensen. 2 keer zo hard. En eigenlijk heb ik de neiging nu om dat tegen de donkere jongetje te zeggen.
Ja, dat moet je niet doen.
Het is zo'n belasting voor iemand, vooral op zo'n jonge leeftijd.
Ja.
All right, so where do I start? Who has the blueprint for our post-racist planet? The book I'm reading to my children has some answers. Okay, ready? Want dit is echt een beetje spannend. Avoiding uncomfortable conversations. Hiding from the truth. Humans were very good at keeping their real feelings bottled up and trapped inside their bodies. But everything changed when a superhero with an amazing ability landed on Earth. The name of this intergalactic body expert? Camille Barton, the trauma extractor.
Don't get me wrong, I think that human beings deserve complete rights for dignity and good quality of living and free from violence and harm, but
perhaps parents need to learn more about themselves before they can learn how to talk to their children about racism. Meta and I take part in a workshop called Embodied Social Change. It's run by Camille Barton. She teaches people to open themselves up to feelings like discomfort, sadness, and anger. What actually happens in your body when you talk about racism?
Today is going to be an exploration. It's by no means going to be a solution to ending racism in this moment, but hopefully it will be an opening to have a little bit more clarity about how some of this stuff relates to your body and the sensations that you feel, what you're maybe carrying around with you, and how that relates to how you interact with other people. 55% of communication is body language, 38% is tone of voice, so the way things are said, and only 7% is spoken words in and of themselves. So the majority of what we're getting from people when we're communicating is non-verbal. So over 80% is just the body.
Why is non-verbal communication so important when it comes to racism?
When we speak about racism or other forms of oppression, there's generally a focus on the mind or on policy, on language and the words that we're using. But what we don't tend to focus so much on is the body and how much our bodies are kind of reproducing these systems of power and dominance on a daily basis.
Why do people find it so difficult to talk about racism?
I think for a number of reasons it's really challenging to have the conversation. So for Black people, I think it's often around pain and not wanting to relive the trauma of those experiences that we viscerally feel when we're trying to communicate around them. And for white people, I think there's a lot of shame and guilt that can emerge, or what tends to happen a lot with white people sort of wanting to be kind of assuaged of their guilt rather than being able to sort of hold space for the person who's saying, hey, this harmful thing happened, or this behavior made me feel like that. There can often be a dynamic where white people say, oh, but I'm not racist, or I didn't mean it like that, or you shouldn't have taken it like that. And what that does is it means that the person in pain isn't being supported. They're being asked to support someone who's, you know, consciously or unconsciously caused harm.
But people tell us, if you look at the many...
And that's something we often don't speak about so much about racism when it's just on the policy level or laws or, you know, race audits. We're missing out the emotional component and the feelings that get dredged up when these memories and these traumas are kind of surfaced.
I find it very difficult to share what my ethnicity is. And a lot of times people ask me that question, like, what is your race? Where do you come from? Yeah.
Is it because, and not obviously asking what your ethnicity is because it's very judged. You know the moment you answer, people are going to be straight like bang.
With kind of newer research in neuroscience that we're seeing around trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, there's a lot more awareness around what's happening in the brain and the body. When we remember traumatic experiences, it's kind of as if the body is reliving it in real time in terms of the reactions that our nervous system has. So even rehashing a memory or having a conversation with someone about a hurtful thing that happened around racism, we will experience many of those same feelings and emotions in our body. So as much as we might like to pretend that we can just have intellectual, sporting conversation, for people that actually live those realities and have that trauma, it's a visceral re-experiencing that's taking place.
Wat ik het lastigste vind, denk ik, qua patronen, is dat ik zou moediger willen zijn. Ik zou, over het goed allyship waar zij het over had. Ik zou meer willen vechten of zo tegen racisme. Ik denk dat ik vaker mijn mond nog open kan doen, vaker naast iemand staan, letterlijk. Ja. Dus ik wil moediger zijn en mijn angsten doorbreken daarin. Ja.
I think there's a lot of discomfort and lack of awareness about the things that are being dredged up, and then we haven't necessarily got many containers in our culture to really sensitively and compassionately hold that conversation.
I haven't been able to talk about it at home with my parents because they told me to This is it. This is reality. Just deal with it. It's better not to fight against it because it's only gonna make worse. So,
What do we need in place to achieve a post-racist future?
I think there's a few components. One, it's really important for people who've been targeted by racism to have access to healing. By focusing on the body and on embodied trauma from racism, we'll be able to support people who've been targeted by it. And then for white people, I think focusing on the body and having this analysis will allow them to be more aware of when guilt and shame is arising and when they may be being reactive rather than responsive.
I now understand that talking about racism, no matter how awkward, is vital. But what was it like when I was little? Did my English mother and Nigerian father ever talk to me about racism? Did you and Dad ever have a plan when it came to talking to me about
No.
racism?
No, not at all. We were never aware, and it was an issue for us when you were older, actually, when you were a teenager. We were never aware that you were exposed to any kind of negative racist comments. Now, whether that was because you chose not to tell us or whether you really weren't, Dad and I never knew.
Did you ask?
We did ask. Dad in particular asked on more than one occasion. But no, we never sort of sat down and said, well, this is how we're going to address it or anything like that.
It was out there.
It was out there, but it wasn't a conversation that I think, if anything cropped up, if anything, became an issue, and then we would talk about it. Sorry.
What's making you upset?
Remembering your dad. Because he was so good at that sort of thing. I feel maybe we let you down, I don't know. Not talking about it. So do you feel we failed you in some way by not raising it more?
To be honest, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard having those conversations. No parent wants to have a conversation with their children about racism. And all of us are wondering when is the right age and when is the right time and how do I go about it? That is something that we want to protect our kids from.
A long time ago, people believed that ignoring something would make it go away. They told their children fairy tales of equality, insisting that differences in skin color didn't matter. Then one day, from a galaxy far, far away, a superhero emerged with an extraordinary gift for all Earthlings. This is Laila Saad and her superpower of passing on knowledge. What would you say your post-racist future looks like?
We're human beings. We're made of darkness and of light. We have these great superpowers, right, that we can use to help and heal the world. And I think a post-racist future is one in which we recognize that all of us are complex human beings, that there's things that we know and we don't know, that there's parts of us that are compassionate and kind, and there's parts of us that are selfish and mean, and we don't make other people wrong for being whole human beings. So I see this post-racist future as one where we reawaken our humanity and reconnect with each other and reconnect to something bigger.
Laila Saad has written many books, among them Me and White Supremacy, a guidebook on privileges and combating racism. She's also the founder of the Good Ancestor Academy, where you can learn how to make the world a better place for future generations. Your work is all about being a good ancestor. What do you mean by that?
Being a good ancestor gives my life meaning. It gives it purpose and direction because you recognize that your being here in the world will impact people for generations to come. That's how important you are, that you will impact people for generations to come. And we live, kind of speaking more like cosmically now, we live with the repercussions of that. We will carry the repercussions of that. And I just want that to be something that's more good than bad. We're all here to play our part in the great story of humanity. We saw some of that after George Floyd's murder. People who'd never protested before, protesting. People who'd never read anti-racism books before, purchasing those books, reading them. We've seen like a small thing of what that could look like. But we need that sustained. You know, we don't need it just for the summer, right? Until the news cycle moves on. We need it sustained over time. The idea of being a good ancestor is recognizing that you have a responsibility. Because when we're not connected to one another, that's when it's okay to treat people in the way that we treat them. That's when it's okay for the violence to take place that does.
As James Baldwin says, history is not the past, it's the present. We carry our history with us, we are our history. So we can't look away from that. A lot of the time, living in individualist societies, we like to think that we're islands unto ourselves and, we get to just roam through the world as free agents and we don't have to take responsibility for anything. We can choose to live like that, but in reality, we are a huge amalgamation of all of the experiences and actions of our ancestors that have come before us. Even scientifically now, we're seeing that the experiences our ancestors have are directly being related and lived through us in the present time. So, for example, there are studies looking at how the genes of descendants of Holocaust survivors have been affected. And you see that there's oftentimes very high rates of anxiety and stress response in the body. So I think it's inaccurate to, believe that we have no connection and that we can kind of remove ourselves from those legacies. It's not our fault that we're born into the bodies all the times that we're living in, but I think it is our responsibility.
Leaving a better world behind for the generations to come involves so much more than having a conversation. Learning how to do that with my children means learning about myself. And most of all, learning how to make real contact again with other people.
And as you look at the person in front of you, I'd like you to become aware that this person has the desire to be loved, seen, and accepted. Might feel a little bit weird. If you feel the need to laugh, that's totally okay. Just allow that to flow. As you look at this person in front of you, I'd like you to bring into your awareness that in their life, they will have experienced some form of suffering, loss, or oppression. And just breathe with that for a few moments. And as you take in this person in front of you, I'd like you to bring into your awareness that they have the power to heal intergenerational trauma and create positive social change in the world. Again. There's space if anyone wants to share. I said intense, but anything that came up during that.
It made me aware of how much that most of the time you don't look at persons. Most of the time.
I think a lot of people have never been looked at like that before.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that have never been looked at like that before, ever, I think.
I think I was scared by the first interaction, which was very intense, and then I kind of closed off.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. Because we're normally shielding, right? To get through the day, to go to work, shield, 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 shield.
I think that's really sad that we have to be tough the whole day and, not really be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. Or at least I feel sometimes like I have to be tough.
What are the ways to open up? Like when I actively knew like I was not being as open as I was the first time.
You have to put yourself open to give the other people the connection and allow them to see you. It's nice. And if you see it in the eyes, it's beautiful. The eyes tell a lot. Yes. Uh-huh.
It's like looking into the library of someone's life, right? Their eyes, it's like a diary, and it's so intense. See, I think it's about being unafraid. It's about being unafraid.
Did you feel unafraid?
I did feel unafraid because I was nervous at first, and I thought, you know what? I need to keep going in that direction. And the final time I did it, I was like, this ends here. Like, the trauma ends here. That was the thing in my head. The last thing I was like, it's done. It's like, it's done.
We are so conditioned to be workers and to fit into the capitalist system and to be productive and having messy conversations, having conflict resolution, dealing with people's trauma, which is usually why other traumas are perpetuated. That takes time, and that is very inconvenient to capital. And if something is happening that's uncomfortable in the body, then we take a pill or we put a cream on. We don't think, why is that happening? What's the root cause? What is this trying to tell me? We almost treat this body as if it's an inconvenience rather than a source of great wisdom and information.
Oh, okay. No, so not public. Private. No, private. Don't allow comments. The body is something we seem to be drifting away from in this modern age of technology. Baby, no recording. It's a lot easier for me to make my children aware of the use of technology than it is to talk about racism. But how much of an issue is racism in the online world?
Ik ook. Mag ik eens? Suki, ik mag niet.
Oh, wow. Oh, hi. Hi, everyone.
Nee, nou, en nu deze. Suki.
Hold on. This one. It was once believed that human brains were limited to just 3 layers: cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem. Until an ingenious scientist created a 4th, an exocortex, enabling us to think freely, to see people for who they really are. A mind-bending, impossible invention. Behold, scientist Senai Gabriab and his superhuman ability, building the megamind.
Ik ben ervan overtuigd dat een toekomst zonder ongelijkheid niet mogelijk is zonder kunstmatige intelligentie. We hebben extra hulp nodig om uit onze eigen menselijke tekortkomingen te komen. Ik denk dat we vooral denken in de categorieën, in de labels die wij van kinds af aan hebben meegekregen, of die we als volwassenen tot ons krijgen via media, sociaal media, traditioneel media. Dat bepaalt in hele hoge mate hoe wij de wereld zien, hoe wij de wereld categoriseren, hoe we het ordenen, hoe we met elkaar omgaan. Dus in die zin zitten we wel een beetje gevangen in de kaders waarin we opgroeien en leven. En het zou mooi zijn als we die kaders kunnen openbreken met behulp van technologie.
En hoe zouden we dat met technologie kunnen doen?
De Universiteit van Stanford heeft samen met de Zwitserse overheid een algoritme ontwikkeld die gebruikt wordt om vluchtelingen te plaatsen op plekken waar de vluchteling zelf er wat aan heeft en de omgeving er ook wat aan heeft. Waarbij beide profiteren van elkaar. Waardoor er situaties ontstaan dat vluchtelingen daar veel makkelijker in de arbeidsmarkt stromen of het onderwijs ingaan. Wij zeggen heel graag mensen te willen zien en te beoordelen op basis van de eigen talenten of op basis van individueel gedrag. Maar het lukt ons niet om dat te doen. We zien heel snel de groep waartoe we die individu toerekenen. Het lukt ons niet omdat ons brein ons elke keer terugbrengt in onze categorieën. Dus voor statushouders is zo'n algoritme is een enorm belangrijk middel om hen te helpen ergens terecht te komen waarin ze zichzelf kunnen ontplooien, maar waarin ze ook van nut kunnen zijn voor de omgeving. En zulke soort maatschappelijke kunstmatige intelligentietechnologieën op verschillende domeinen vormen een exocortex die ons allen kan dienen.
Een exocortex, dat klinkt spannend. Wat is dat precies?
Je kan AI zien, of kunstmatige intelligentie zien als een soort exocortex, een laag boven de neocortex. In zekere zin bestaat al zo'n vierde laag, bestaat al zo'n exocortex. En die exocortex die is nu in handen en wordt vormgegeven door de grote social media bedrijven, door de big tech. Die hebben de mazen in het brein ontdekt en daarmee ook ons gedrag in kaart gebracht. Zij gebruiken social media om te kijken waar wij geïnteresseerd in zijn, in welke categorieën we denken, dus ook in welke categorieën ze ons kunnen vangen. En wat zij doen is deze categorieën, deze exocortex, gebruiken om ons te vangen in hun bubbels. Om ons aan te zetten tot bepaald klikgedrag of koopgedrag. Je ziet het niet. Het is niet een hele fysieke exocortex die ze gebruiken, maar je bent wel bezig met je telefoon. Je wordt overal via social media maak je contact. Wifi waar informatie doorheen gaat. De exocortex is er al. En die gebruiken we tot op een zekere hoogte voor ons eigen gemak. Anderen gebruiken het als een verdienmodel, anderen weer als een controlemodel. En het is denk ik de uitdaging om juist maatschappelijke AI, een vierde laag te creëren die het sociaal belang, het algemeen belang dient. Een laag die ons voedt met nieuwe gevarieerde informatie die ons uit onze bubbels haalt. En dat is de exocortex waar ik naartoe wil werken.
Het is niet naar jou toe, het is een probleem van haar. En het is niet mijn probleem. En toen zei ik tegen haar van, hou je rustig en dan komt alles maar goed.
When I've experienced discrimination in public, some of the most hurtful parts of it is that lots of the time people just watch and they don't say anything. But then when the interaction's over, then they'll come up and say, oh, that was so awful. That looked so terrible. I'm so, and it's like, well, you were just standing there. You didn't do anything. When it comes to racism, I think it's encouraged to believe that it's just a few bad apples. And I think that's quite dangerous because it removes our individual agency to actually take responsibility for the ways that we operate in our communities.
There are days when I feel like my body and my skin is I'm like a really friendly person. I love meeting people. There are places I can't walk in my own town because I might get attacked. I can't just walk in and buy everyone a drink and be like, let's talk, how was your week? I can't do that. And it's like sometimes my body is like a vehicle. I can't escape. It's like I'm going down the street and people see, it's like my body is like a drunk driver. And people see it and they're like, get out the way. Or my body is like an alligator or a bear. And people have to shoot it or kill it or stab it or imprison it. And I'm like, I get up in the morning and I'm a friendly person and I'm in the body of a monster. I'm a monster to people and I can't escape that. And my mum was saying to me, she was saying, Musa, like, how is it sometimes out there? How is it in Germany? Like, meet someone, this and that. I said, look, I'm a monster to most people. That's how it is. Like, I'm a physical object of fear. And I don't choose that. I don't choose that. Some might say that's not true, that's not true. I was like, nah, it's true. Like it, you feel it. After 40 years wearing this body, you know when people are afraid of you. and I have to carry that. It's not my problem, but it is my problem.
The everyday racism that we face often isn't from people who consciously, purposely want to be racist. The everyday racism we face is from people who say things like, I don't see color, or I have friends who are black, or I voted for a certain president. You have to put aside wanting to be seen as a good person, because wanting to be seen as a good person is actually preventing you from being a good person. You're more concerned with, see these nice parts of me, ignore the ways that I cause harm. But instead, when someone says, this is something that you did that caused harm, we can turn around and say, yes, I recognize that that's inside of me. And I'm sorry, right? I'm gonna do the work that I can to heal that or to work through that, and I apologize, and here's how I'm going to make amends. It's not about, like, we're talking about a utopian world, but I think this idea of a utopian human being is actually it's not one that's perfect and never makes mistakes. It's one that's whole and owns all the different parts of themselves.
Hearing your stories, I realized that a lot of you guys have that every day. I didn't realize that it exists, actually. I thought it was, you have a nasty experience and you go on, but if you have that experience every day or every week, I can't imagine how that would feel. I also think I behaved too much as a bystander. If I'm not doing anything racist, it's okay, but I realize it's not enough. If somebody is treated not okay, I have to speak up, and I hope next time I will do that.
I think there has to be a desire to question certain things, to question privilege, to question power. We all have power in different ways. We all have agency in different ways. But I think there has to be a willingness to really engage with that conversation and have a degree of self-reflection. And I do believe that there's a possibility for people to change. But I think that it takes a willingness to really go there.
Huh? That's jullie?
Ja.
How'd you do that?
Weet ik niet.
Wow. How did you do that?
Ik deed zeg maar...
I can't believe I'm already at dad's stage where you're doing things and I just have no clue how to do that.
Kijk,
De grootste techbedrijven, zoals de Googles en de Facebooks en de Amazons, de machtige bedrijven, dat zijn bedrijven waar voornamelijk jonge witte mannen werken. Dat is helemaal niet erg, maar als het alleen maar jonge witte mannen, of voornamelijk jonge witte mannen zijn, dan bestaat de kans dat je technologie ontwikkelt die vooral die jonge witte mannen representeert en dient. Zelflerende systemen, zoals machines, leren op basis van data. Als wij machines voeden met de data die wij zelf collecteren, of met de categorieën waar wij zelf gebruik van maken, dan zullen machines de wereld beginnen te zien zoals wij dat zien. Er zijn een aantal hele duidelijke voorbeelden van kunstmatige intelligentie waarmee zwarte mensen worden benadeeld. Als zwart persoon heb je 5% meer kans om aangereden te worden door een zelfrijdende auto dan als een witte persoon. Een ander voorbeeld is gezichtsherkenning. Gezichtsherkenningstechnologieën identificeren zwarte en Aziatische personen tot 100 keer minder goed als witte personen. En dat kan consequenties hebben als politiemachten gezichtsherkenningstechnologieën gebruiken. Aan de ene kant is dit natuurlijk negatief, dat dit wordt geconstateerd. Tegelijkertijd, kunstmatige intelligentie leidt niet per se zelf tot ongelijkheid. Het legt ongelijkheid in de maatschappij bloot. Als we blootleggen waar het fout gaat, kunnen we daar vervolgens oplossingen voor bieden. En daarom is het ontzettend belangrijk dat als technologie wordt ontwikkeld, dat dat gedaan wordt door mensen met diverse achtergronden, diverse expertise, zodat je technologie op een inclusieve manier kunt ontwikkelen. Er zijn 2 miljard jongeren op aarde. Als die jongeren leren wat algoritmisch denken is, of zelf algoritmes kunnen maken, dan ontstaat er een hele rijkdom aan creatief jonge mensen. Dat is waar wij allen in zouden moeten investeren.
A while ago, I was watching a news item about the murder of George Floyd on my laptop. My daughter, Suki, looked over my shoulder and asked what was going on. I didn't know what to say to her, and after a clumsy attempt at explaining it, we were both in tears. Her question had taken me by surprise, and I wondered, how could I have done a better job?
It's important to talk to your kids outside of traumatic incidents about race so that they become comfortable with the conversation around race and difference, so that when something like that does happen, you can reference past conversations that you've had and help them to understand this is the outcome of what can happen because of how people treat each other differently, and some people have power and some people don't, and treat it as an ongoing conversation instead of one really scary talk. It's scary for the parent, it's scary for the children, and everyone is left feeling like, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? And children are left feeling just helpless, really.
When is the right moment then to talk to them about it?
It's something that you talk about when you're driving in the car. It's something that you talk about when you're getting books from the library. It's something that you talk about after you've seen a movie. It's something that you talk about when an incident has happened in school or when you're looking at materials from school. It's teaching them to notice the water or teaching them to notice the air. How is it a part of every part of our lives? We want them to grow up to become people who, when they have the ability to take power or to hold power over other people, that they make different choices than the ones that are being made right now. For parents who have white privilege, who do not talk to their children about what it means to be white, what it means to have white privilege, you may think that you're being neutral, but what you're putting out into the world and what you're raising your children to be is completely unaware of the ways that they are able to navigate this world in safer ways, in ways with more ease, in ways with more peace. And you're not educating them as to how they could be harming people in these unconscious ways.
I'm learning more and more how I can help my children navigate towards a new world. But what does that world actually look like? If we want to build a post-racist planet, we have to be able to imagine it first. The wordsmith, a man who adored the magic of words. Words conjure images which amaze and astonish us. They can be used to change minds, create movements, to build a better world. Something that our next superhero kept on imagining, until it became reality. This is the story of interstellar astronaut Musa Okwonga and his superpower of imagination.
Imagination is incredibly important to me. It's why I do all the work that I do. I believe that we're in a time where ideas, for this brief moment in time, are the currency, the most important currency. You look at Greta Thunberg and the work she's done in relation to climate change and how ideas have gone around the world faster than billionaires could stop them. So for me, every day, I'm trying to imagine a better future. And it's no coincidence that so many of my friends, my black friends, are writing sci-fi novels because we're all trying to imagine better futures.
Musa Okwonga is a writer for newspapers like the New York Times and The Guardian, and he's a musician. His weapon in the battle against inequality and racism is imagination.
I would say that not so much the role of artists, but the opportunity of artists is to help us all imagine the unimaginable in a positive way. When we talk about a post-racist world, many will say, oh, that's utopia, but I think the artists have the opportunity and the creativity to show us what that looks like. It's one thing saying, oh, this is a post-racist world, and you could show them, for example, Wakanda. You know, this is what Black Panther was about. It's why it's so powerful, because Black Panther as a movie showed people a vision of what it could look like.
Receiving an award for playing a superhero is amazing, but it's even greater to acknowledge the heroes that we have in real life.
When I came across Octavia Butler's work, it was revolutionary. She, as an author, was a Black woman writing science fiction, and I read Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, and the protagonist of that book became this superhero to me. She lived in a dystopian time where humanity had basically failed itself, and she was receiving messages that humanity was supposed to leave Earth and take root among the stars, go to Mars and evolve there. And you know, everyone thought that she was out of her mind because they were just in survival mode. And she's thinking about the evolution of humanity, and they're just trying to get through day to day. And it really made me think about how there have always been dystopian times, and there have always been people who've said, I refuse to accept these times, and I'm going to vision a better future, and I'm going to work to that vision. We have to keep imagination alive. We have to see a world bigger and better than the world that we currently have.
A post-racist future. So let's say in the future that there is a massive flood and I have to build an anti-racist city. The first thing I do would assemble a planning committee composed of people from a variety of communities. Trans communities, people of color, trans people of color, people with disabilities. You build society where there was greater access to healthcare, to energy, to counseling, to therapy. You design a working week where people got more time to spend with their children and also just on their own spare time, their cultural pursuits. You design a universal basic income. I think you'd also look at play. You'd look at just fun for the sake of fun. You'd have large open spaces where people could freely mingle, because freedom of movement is radical. If we look at a world where borders are always closing, let's open every border that a city has. Yeah, that's my utopia. That's where I'd start. And some might say to me, oh, but you haven't mentioned racism once. I said, well, here's the thing. In a post-racist society, the best ideas come from everyone regardless of their background. And if you get rid of racism, you start listening to everyone who's already got the solutions, but who's not being listened to and who's not getting the investment. I call it a utopia, not because it won't happen, but because I think it's a vision that we have to be aiming towards. I mean, if we're being honest, the utopia for some people was white supremacy and the enslavement of black people, and that utopia happened for hundreds of years. Apartheid was the utopia for some people. They imagined it and it happened. The utopia I imagine in a post-racist society is one where none of this exists. That's just as radical a vision in its own way as the enslavement of human beings. It's just as radical in its own way and fundamental, a change to society in its own way, as apartheid was. My radical imagination is one where none of that exists ever again. And I think it's really powerful to teach children to always speak up. It doesn't mean having to go on marches. It means in a dinner table with a loved one, in a relationship, on a date, and someone says something discriminatory about someone, you're like, actually, I'm not cool with that. I don't think we judge people just because of where they're from. We judge them according to their character. Just that one message at a very early age, you'll change the world in a few years if you teach them that.
To speak up.
To speak up. So in terms of the tools you can give children from an early age, you give them books where people of all backgrounds are represented not just as good people, but in the full complexity of humanity. It's not that we should bring up all black people to be like, oh, all black people are lovely. No, it's like we are as complex and nuanced as anyone else. And our books, our art, our literature that we're fed, that we consume, reflect that complexity.
I think for me, the end goal is connection. It's greater intimacy, greater empathy. I think we're living in a time where many people feel a sense of disconnection. We have rampant loneliness, anxiety, a lot of things in our bodies that are telling us something's not quite right. We were expecting more connection and closeness than we have. I'm interested in creating a world where our laws are an extension of what we believe to be morally just and right, which comes from being more in tune with our own internal compass, our own sense of believing that all humans should be treated with care and compassion and empathy.
We need policies change, we need laws change, we need institutions change, but if the people don't change, the people who walk out the policies, the people who are supposed to follow the laws, if they don't change, then things stay the same.
And how fast can we make those changes?
We can make those changes at the speed of transformation. And I know that sounds really like, ooh, what does that mean? But we don't wait until we know all the answers. This is an ongoing process, an ongoing practice, an ongoing journey. We're taking the baton from the ancestors who came before us, who did the same, walking with it on this path now while we're here so that we can pass it on when we're gone.
If there are people watching this who think, okay, what can I do next? How can I bring about a post-racist society? I'll say this. You can start right now. You'll probably have access to Google, so you can find so many resources from the world's greatest thinkers on race on where to go next. So I would say read, read, read. Keep learning, keep intervening, because it's not just the big marches, the big protests. It's about having the difficult conversations with those relatives and those work colleagues that you've been avoiding, because we've all been avoiding them. People say they don't see racism. They do see it. They're just afraid to speak up about it. So I would say stop being afraid. I'd also say you're going to get stuff wrong, and that's okay. Just as if you're raising kids, you'll have a day where, you know what, I wasn't my best today, and that's okay. Keep going. Compassionate people, kind people are not discouraged. Anti-racism is a lifetime of caring. That is a beautiful thing. And who wants to be discouraged from a lifetime of caring? That's a terrible thing. So keep learning, keep caring, keep loving, and keep pushing.
Everyone had worked very, very hard to make their dream a reality. A new era could begin. Our post-racist era is finally here.